Historians tell us Egypt was obsessed with death. Tombs, mummies, pyramids, a civilization haunted by the afterlife. But what if that story is wrong? What if every stone, every symbol, every ritual was not about death at all, but about life, about the hidden laws that govern reality itself? The priests of Egypt were not caretakers of superstition. They were scientists of the unseen. Their temples were classrooms, their myths equations, their rituals coded technologies of consciousness, the Nile's flooding, the stars over Giza, the chants echoing inside stone chambers. All of it was more than ceremony. It was a living demonstration of the universal laws. As the Hermetic texts later whispered, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing." The kybalion did not emerge from thin air. It was the echo of Egypt's eternal voice, carved into silence long before paper or ink. In this journey, you will see Egypt as you've never seen it before, not as a museum of ruins, but as a mirror of the cosmos itself. Stay with me until the end, and you will uncover how pyramids, gods, and ancient rituals were never about worshiping the dead, but about teaching the living how to master the laws that shape reality. Egypt was not simply a kingdom of kings and farmers. It was a school, an entire nation structured as a temple. Every stone, every ritual, every festival was designed to prepare the human being for something greater than survival, for awakening. The temples were not houses of worship in the modern sense. They were engines of transformation. When one entered Karnak, Luxor, or Abydos, the architecture itself was a map of the inner world. Columns and corridors guided the initiate through the stages of consciousness, from ignorance to illumination. The journey through stone mirrored the journey of the soul. Priests were not mere functionaries. They were guardians of a science that blended astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and mysticism into a single whole. Their rituals were rehearsals of the cosmic order, living dramatizations of the universal laws in motion. To stand inside the temple was to step into the architecture of reality itself. Even daily life was infused with initiation. Festivals synchronized the people with the cycles of the stars. Myths of gods and goddesses were not just stories, but lessons encrypted in narrative. The pharaoh himself was seen as the living Horus, the embodiment of the human potential to unite heaven and earth. Egypt, then, was not obsessed with death. It was obsessed with immortality, with aligning the individual soul to the eternal laws that govern both gods and mortals. This is the key most historians miss. Egypt was a civilization built as an initiation chamber for humanity. Long before psychology or quantum physics, Egypt already whispered a secret: all is mind. The universe was not seen as a machine, but as thought made visible. Rituals began with words of power, hekau. To the Egyptians, these were not metaphors. A spoken word was a vibration, a frequency that bent reality. To utter a name was to summon its essence. To inscribe a symbol was to crystallize a thought into permanence. Hieroglyphs were not mere writing. They were living formulas, doorways through which consciousness shaped matter. The pharaoh himself embodied this law. He was not only a ruler of land, but the divine mind on earth, the axis between heaven and the human realm. His decrees carried weight not because of politics, but because they were seen as echoes of the universal thought that sustains existence. Modern science now confirms what Egypt enacted in stone and ritual. Observation itself alters reality. Quantum experiments reveal that particles behave differently when measured, as if mind and matter are inseparable. Egypt had no laboratories. Their temples were the laboratories. Their experiments were myths, chants, and ceremonies that proved the same truth. Reality begins in the mind. And so, when an initiate entered the temple and spoke the sacred words, he was not praying. He was programming reality. Mentalism was not belief. It was the operating system of the cosmos. As above, so below. The phrase survives in Hermetic texts, but its seed was planted long before in Egypt, a civilization that didn't just believe in correspondence, but built its world around it. The pyramids of Giza rise from the desert not as tombs, but as reflections of the heavens. Their alignment with Orion's belt was no accident. To the Egyptians, Orion was Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. By placing their pyramids in correspondence with those stars, they anchored the cycle of resurrection into stone. The heavens became the architect, and earth obeyed. Sirius, the brightest star, was Isis. Its heliacal rising announced the flooding of the Nile, the river of life. When Sirius rose, the Nile rose. The sky spoke, the earth answered. The Egyptians saw this not as coincidence, but as proof. The cosmos breathes through matter, and matter responds. Even the Nile itself mirrored the Milky Way, a ribbon of stars above, a river of water below. Their temples embodied this principle in detail so precise it still baffles us. Columns imitating papyrus stalks, ceilings painted with constellations, chambers oriented to solstices. A temple was not simply a building, it was a map of the universe, a miniature cosmos you could walk through. To cross its thresholds was to step into correspondence itself. Every wall, reminding the initiate that the laws governing galaxies were the same laws governing their own heart. Modern science has stumbled back into this truth. Fractals reveal self-repeating patterns across scales, from river deltas to neurons, from galaxies to the branching of lungs. Holographic theory suggests the whole is contained in every part. Quantum entanglement shows that particles light years apart echo each other's states. Egypt whispered this long ago. The pattern above is the pattern within. And so, correspondence is more than metaphor. It is the hidden fabric of reality. To know the universe, look into yourself. To know yourself, look at the stars. What the priests inscribed on temple walls is still true. Man is not separate from cosmos, but its living reflection. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Egyptians didn't need a physics textbook to know this. They carved it into stone, sang it in chants, built it into chambers that still hum with invisible resonance. Step inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. Whisper a sound, and it doesn't simply echo. It lives. The chamber amplifies, sustains, and bends the vibration as if the very stone were tuned to a hidden frequency. This was not coincidence. The granite itself contains quartz, capable of piezoelectric resonance. Modern science recognizes this property, but the Egyptians applied it. They engineered sound to awaken states of consciousness. Rituals relied on more than incense and offerings. They relied on vibration. Priests chanted Hekau, words of power, not as empty prayers, but as frequencies capable of altering reality. Hieroglyphs themselves were seen as sound crystallized into form, each symbol a frozen vibration, storing power even in silence. To speak them was to set energy into motion. Their instruments carried the same secret. The sistrum, a rattle dedicated to Hathor, was believed to shake the very fabric of existence. Drums and flutes were not music. They were medicine, each note striking resonance within the body, aligning it with cosmic rhythm. Even the opening of the mouth ceremony for the dead was an act of vibration, restoring breath, the primal sound, into statues and souls alike. Today, science confirms what the ancients intuited. Frequency shapes matter. Cymatics reveals sand arranging itself into sacred geometry under vibration. Ultrasound heals tissues. Sound waves levitate particles. Modern experiments echo what Egypt practiced millennia ago. Vibration is creation itself. The Egyptians knew. To master vibration was to master transformation. Every chant, every tone, every stone was a reminder that the universe is not silent. It sings, and if you learn to listen, You can rewrite reality in its key. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. The Egyptians didn't treat this as philosophy. They lived inside it. Every myth, every god, every ritual was a mirror of polarity in action. Take Isis and Osiris. She, the nurturing force of magic and restoration. He, the sovereign of order and rebirth. Together, they were not just a divine couple. They were the cosmic equation of polarity, feminine and masculine, creation and regeneration, light and shadow. From their union, Horus was born, not merely a son, but the synthesis of opposites, the living balance. The sun and the moon trace the same lesson across the sky, one blazing, one reflecting. Day and night endlessly exchanging power, neither winning, neither losing. Even life and death were not enemies in Egypt. The Book of the Dead was not a tale of endings, but of transitions. Death as the necessary polarity of rebirth. To die was to step into the opposite pole of existence, not to vanish. Temples themselves embodied polarity. Light entering at dawn and fading into shadow at dusk. Architecture designed to remind initiates that truth only reveals itself between opposites. Statues of gods often appeared in pairs. One hand closed, one open, one eye fierce, the other serene. The message was clear. Extremes conceal, balance reveals. Modern science rediscovers the same law. Electricity flows only because positive and negative charges attract. Magnetism exists through opposing poles. Even DNA spirals in mirrored strands. The universe insists. Polarity is not conflict, but creation. Without duality, there is no motion, no life. The Egyptians whispered this secret in myth and carved it into stone. Learn to reconcile the opposites within yourself, and you will awaken the true power of polarity. For the greatest alchemy is not turning lead into gold, it is turning division into unity. To everything there is a season. The Egyptians didn't just observe rhythm, they synchronized their entire civilization to it. The Nile itself was their greatest teacher. Its annual flood wasn't a disaster to fear, but a pulse to honor. Too much water meant chaos. Too little meant famine. But when the rhythm was balanced, life flourished. Their calendar wasn't arbitrary. It was tuned to the cosmic beat of Sirius rising in the sky, announcing the flood. Temples were aligned not only to the sun's solstices, but to the cycles of the stars, so that every ritual echoed the cosmic dance. Festivals marked equinoxes, harvests, and celestial events, not as entertainment, but as participation in the great metronome of the universe. The principle of rhythm was written in their myths too. Ra, the sun god, journeyed across the sky each day and descended into the underworld each night, dying, battling, and being reborn in an endless cycle. Even the gods themselves were subject to rhythm. Eternity wasn't stillness. It was the perpetual flow of descent and return. Architecture embodied rhythm in stone. Walking through temple corridors, initiates would move from light to shadow, narrow to wide, silence to echo. A physical journey that mirrored the rhythms of existence itself. The very experience of space was a teaching. All things rise and fall. Flow with it, and you will know the divine pulse. Science again meets the ancients here. Heartbeats, circadian rhythms, the cycles of the moon influencing tides and even human biology. Quantum fields vibrate in oscillations. Galaxies themselves expand and contract in breath-like motions. Rhythm is the invisible drummer behind every dance of existence. The Egyptians understood. Mastery was not about resisting rhythm, but about aligning with it. When you recognize that every setback, every surge, every silence is part of a greater pulse, you stop fearing the lows. For the tide will rise again, and the true initiate learns to ride both ebb and flow. The Egyptians didn't believe in random chance. To them, nothing just happened. Every ripple had a stone that caused it, every shadow traced back to a flame. At the heart of this truth was Maat, goddess of order, balance, and cosmic justice. She wasn't just a deity to worship, but a principle to embody. In the Hall of Judgment, the dead did not face eternal fire or paradise by whim. They faced a scale. On one side, the heart, containing the weight of their deeds. On the other, Maat's feather, symbol of truth. If the heart was heavier, devoured it would be, not by cruelty, but by the law of balance itself. Cause and effect was not punishment, it was equilibrium. This principle reached far beyond the afterlife. Egyptians believed every action in daily life echoed into eternity. Words spoken with anger created imbalance. Acts of generosity restored harmony. Farmers, priests, builders, all lived with the awareness that their choices shaped not just their destiny, but the rhythm of the cosmos itself. Rituals reinforced this law. Offerings weren't bribes to gods. They were acknowledgments of reciprocity. Planting, harvesting, celebrating festivals. Each was a way of moving in sync with the cause and effect cycles of nature. The sacred architecture itself carried this truth. For every stone laid in alignment, the temple stood for millennia. For every miscalculation, collapse followed. And modern science echoes their wisdom. Newton's laws show that every action has a reaction. Systems theory proves that feedback loops govern ecosystems and economies alike. Karma, as the East called it, finds its parallel in physics and biology. The Egyptians already knew. There is no escape from causality. The only freedom is found in how consciously you plant your causes. The initiate's lesson was simple yet terrifying. Nothing is wasted, nothing is hidden. Every thought, every word, every act sets in motion a chain that must complete its circle. To live aligned with Maat was not about fear, but about freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing the universe is just, and that you are never a victim of chance, but an author of consequence. To the Egyptians, creation itself was never the work of a single force. It was always the union of two, the dance of masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, sky and earth. They saw this not as opposition, but as complementarity, the sacred weaving that made life possible. In myth, Nut, the goddess of the sky, arched over Geb, the god of the earth. Their eternal embrace was both forbidden and essential. For from their union, the cycles of time and the births of gods emerged. Isis and Osiris embodied the same principle, love and unity that gave rise to Horus, symbol of renewal. Gender was not biology, it was cosmic architecture. Temples carried this truth in stone. The masculine, represented by vertical obelisks, reached toward the heavens. The feminine, embodied in the vast womb-like sanctuaries, received and gestated divine energy. Together they formed spaces where the material world touched the eternal, where initiates could encounter the creative balance that sustains all existence. This law extended to magic and ritual. Every spell, every hymn, every ceremony required polarity. Active and receptive, seed and soil, word and silence. Without the union of these two forces, nothing could be born. Not a god, not a star, not even a single blade of grass. The Egyptians understood. Creation is not domination, but cooperation. And here again, science circles back to confirm the mystery. From the double helix of DNA, two strands entwined to carry the code of life, to the dance of positive and negative charges in every atom, reality itself obeys the law of gender. Masculine and feminine are not labels of identity, but forces of balance encoded into the cosmos. For the seeker, the lesson was clear. Within you, both currents live. The masculine will to act and shape, the feminine power to receive, nurture, and transform. To awaken is to bring them into harmony. For when you do, you mirror the very principle that built pyramids, birthed gods, and sustains galaxies. The pyramids were not monuments to the dead, they were monuments to life. to the invisible laws that pulse beneath every heartbeat, every star, every thought you've ever had. Egypt was not obsessed with death. It was obsessed with eternity, and eternity lives through the universal laws. Every myth, every symbol, every ritual was a lesson disguised in stone and story. Mentalism taught that thought is the seed of creation. Correspondence revealed the mirror between heaven and earth. Vibrations sang through chants and resonant chambers. Polarities, rhythms, causes, and genders intertwined, showing that the cosmos itself was one great initiation. And here is the hidden truth. Egypt was not simply practicing these laws. It was these laws. To study its temples is to study yourself. To walk through its myths is to walk through your own psyche. The ancients carved not just stone. They carved a map of reality, waiting for those with eyes to see. So the next time you look at the Sphinx, or the constellations above, remember, they are speaking the same language. The Egyptians whispered it in symbols. Science now confirms it in equations. And you are the bridge between the two. Because awakening is not about escaping the world. It is about seeing the code behind it. And Egypt has been holding that code all along. If this journey stirred something within you, then you are ready for the deeper mysteries. Subscribe to Infinity Echoes and step with us into the forgotten architecture of the universe. Activate the bell, because what comes next will take you even further into the hidden laws that shape your reality.